Chapter 24, Leadership Struggles, Part 1. The dim light of torches flickered against the cold stone walls of the Sent One's hidden headquarters. The air was thick with unease. Goldar's absence was palpable, his capture by the city militia leaving a void that no one seemed ready to fill. But the cult couldn't afford to linger in disarray. They needed a leader, and the burden had fallen on Torgar. Standing before the gathered cultists, Torgar's usual stoic demeanor was marred by uncertainty. His deep voice echoed through the chamber as he addressed the group. "Goldar entrusted us with this mission. We cannot falter now," he said, his tone firm but lacking the commanding edge that Goldar had wielded so effortlessly. Murmurs of discontent rippled through the crowd. A burly cultist named Valrek stepped forward, his voice laced with skepticism. "And what do you know of leadership, Torgar? You've always been the second, never the first. How can we trust you to guide us?" Torgar's jaw tightened. "This isn't about me. It's about survival. If we don't regroup and prepare, the Unbound will finish what the city started." The room erupted in argument. Voices overlapped, some defending Torgar, others calling for a vote or even abandoning the mission altogether. The tension was suffocating, and for a moment, it seemed as if the cult might collapse under the weight of its own discord. From the back of the room, Lucas, Mina, and Thomas watched in silence. Mina leaned in, whispering to Lucas, "This isn't going to hold. They're falling apart." Lucas nodded, his mind racing. The cult's instability only reinforced his growing doubts about their mission. They had relied on the cult for shelter and resources, but now it seemed clear that their survival would depend on their own strength. Torgar finally silenced the room by slamming his fist on the stone table at the center. "Enough," he barked. "We are Sent Ones. We don't cower, and we don't break. If anyone thinks they can lead better, step forward now." The room fell into an uneasy silence. No one moved. Torgar took a deep breath, regaining a shred of composure. "Good. Then we move forward. We regroup, we train, and we prepare for what's coming." The cultists dispersed reluctantly, the fractures in their unity far from healed. As the crowd thinned, Torgar caught Lucas's eye and gave a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement of the younger man's growing importance. Lucas turned to Mina and Thomas. "We need to focus on our own training. If this is the state of the cult, we can't rely on them to protect us." Mina nodded. "Agreed. We'll need to be ready, with or without their help." Thomas crossed his arms, his gaze steely. "Then let's get to work. This war isn't waiting for anyone." The three stepped away from the crumbling leadership, resolved to forge their own path amid the chaos. The echoes of their footsteps resonated throughout the cold stone hallways of the Sent One's headquarters as Lucas, Mina, and Thomas gathered in the dimly lit training space. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and the sharp tang of metal. There were no instructors now, no cultists to guide them in their training. With Goldar's capture, most of the higher-ranking cultists had gone into hiding or had retreated to their own quarters, leaving the trio to fend for themselves. Mina adjusted her stance, balancing on the balls of her feet, her body taut with anticipation. Lucas stood across from her, focusing intently on his hands, the air around him crackling with the faintest hint of heat. Thomas, his large frame moving with the precision of a seasoned fighter, paced between them, assessing the situation. "We need to sync better," Lucas said, his voice focused. "My telekinesis is weak right now. Trying to pull anything heavier than a stone is difficult. I need better timing if I'm going to keep things airborne while you move in." Mina nodded. "I'll work on my timing. Speed's not the issue. It's being able to strike with precision while you're holding the enemy in place. If we're off by a second, everything falls apart." Thomas crossed his arms, stepping back to observe. "The key is fluidity. Lucas, you need to hold multiple objects in place without losing focus. And Mina, you need to close the gap between you and the target without hesitation. I'll keep my distance and keep the enemy off you both." They began again, a whirlwind of motion, testing each other's limits. Lucas focused on levitating a small set of rocks, lifting them above his head as Mina darted between them, her movements a blur of speed. The stones floated steadily, but Lucas's concentration wavered. He cursed under his breath as the rocks dropped. "Again," Mina urged, not missing a beat. Lucas exhaled, pushing his doubt aside. He couldn't afford to fail. Not now. The weight of their situation pressed down on him. Being holed up here, training in isolation, felt like being a burden to the cult. They were stuck in this desolate place, with no clear path forward, contributing nothing. He wasn't sure if it was just their situation weighing on him or something else, an unspoken guilt that sat in the pit of his stomach, growing heavier every day. Mina caught his gaze for a moment. "We've got this. Just don't focus on what we can't do. We'll get there, Lucas." Thomas clapped his hands together to refocus their attention. "We need to be ready for anything. The cult's going through its own struggles, but we're not going to stay here, hiding in the shadows." Mina caught her breath, then nodded. "I've been thinking the same thing. We've been stuck here long enough. We can't keep pretending we're just part of the cult, waiting for them to tell us what to do. The next fight, we need to step up. We're not just passengers anymore." Lucas and Thomas shared a look. It was the same feeling they'd all been harboring, the growing disquiet over being dependent on the cult, over watching their own power, their abilities, go untapped while the world around them burned. "I agree," Lucas said, his voice steady. "The time for hiding is over." "I'll talk to my butler," Mina added, her gaze hardening with resolve. "I need to make him understand. He can't follow me into the city, not with the state he's in. I won't let him throw his life away." Thomas raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, but respecting her decision. "You know he'll fight you on that." "I know," Mina replied, the weight of the conversation already pulling at her. "But it's not his fight. Not anymore." As the trio continued their training, the flickering torches casting long shadows against the stone walls, they pushed their limits. The quiet hum of their combined energy filled the air, each move, each strike, each moment of concentration bringing them closer to something larger than the struggle at hand. They weren't just trying to survive anymore. They were preparing to fight. Later, as they paused to catch their breath, Dira appeared at the edge of the training area, her presence a stark contrast to the focused energy of the trio. She stepped forward hesitantly, her hands nervously twisting together. "Mina," she called softly. Mina turned to face her, wiping the sweat from her brow. "Dira, what is it?" Dira shifted on her feet, glancing around nervously before leaning in slightly. "I wanted to apologize. For everything. For guiding you toward that beast lair in the sewers. And for not being honest with you about the temple. I should have told you more." Mina raised an eyebrow, suspicious yet curious. "What are you talking about? The temple?" Dira hesitated, her eyes darting around as if checking for anyone listening. "The relics there. They could help the Sent Ones in battle. Torgar doesn't understand them properly. I think they're weapons of sorts, and I believe they might be activated by those of us who are truly connected to the Sent Ones. You have a part to play in that, Mina. You both do." Mina studied Dira, her mind racing. "Why are you telling me this?" Dira's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I want to make up for the mistake I made. You're more than just pawns in this war. I can see that now. And I can't let the cult destroy you all over something that could be avoided." Mina didn't answer right away, the weight of Dira's words settling heavily on her. She didn't trust Dira entirely, but this new information was something to consider. "Well," Mina said finally, her voice firm, "we'll see if those relics can actually do what you say. I'll keep an eye on Torgar and his plans." Dira nodded, looking relieved. "I hope I'm not too late to make amends." As Dira left them, the trio exchanged a look. The conversation about the relics only deepened their resolve. They couldn't afford to stay in the shadows any longer. Later, as they prepared to continue their training, Lucas voiced what had been on all their minds. "The cult's falling apart. We can't rely on them for protection. If we want to make a difference, we need to step up and stop hiding." Thomas nodded grimly. "We'll fight, together." Mina's mind shifted to her butler again, her responsibility weighing on her. The conversation was unavoidable. She knew he wouldn't understand. He never did. But she had to convince him. For his safety, for their survival, she had to make him stay behind. With a final glance at her companions, she steeled herself for the hard conversations ahead. There was no turning back now. The streets of Brum'karoth felt like a ticking clock. With each passing day, the militia's presence grew more pronounced, and the once bustling marketplaces now hummed with whispers of unrest. The city, built into the very bones of the earth, had always been a haven of industry and trade. But now there was an edge to everything. The sharp clang of armor against stone, the hurried steps of guards on patrol, the nervous glances exchanged between civilians. Inside the walls, the city's defenses were being fortified. Military officers issued commands, while soldiers hurriedly repaired barricades, reinforced gates, and stocked the supply vaults with weapons. A mix of makeshift defenses, wooden spikes, chain-link fences, hastily constructed watchtowers, stood alongside the more traditional stone fortifications. Every crack in the city's outer perimeter was inspected and fixed. Every door was checked, and every merchant's shop was examined for hidden compartments that might harbor explosives or weapons. The militia was not just strengthening their hold on the outer perimeter, they were expanding their reach within the city as well. Small patrols moved through the narrow alleys, ensuring that no cultist sympathizers were hiding within the crowded city blocks. City leaders held meetings behind closed doors, discussing the increasing frequency of strange encounters. Some claimed to see figures in the shadows, while others spoke of odd, half-seen rituals in the dead of night. No one could explain what was happening, but every day seemed to bring another strange report. The tension was palpable. The people, once confident in the security that Brum'karoth's sturdy stone walls provided, were now plagued by fear and uncertainty. Markets that were once filled with chatter and laughter now buzzed with hushed voices and anxious faces. The air was thick with suspicion. It was hard to trust anyone, even those you had known for years. Some of the more paranoid citizens refused to leave their homes, afraid that they might be next, that the cults would sweep through the city at any moment, just like the rumors suggested. Others turned to the militia, seeking reassurance, but even the soldiers had no answers. They only promised vigilance, knowing that they were preparing for something, though they couldn't say what. As the day faded and the sun dipped below the horizon, the streets of Brum'karoth darkened. The city's night watch took over, moving in pairs along the narrow streets, their torches casting flickering shadows on the walls. Their eyes were sharp, but no matter how many patrols there were, no one could shake the gnawing feeling that something was slipping through the cracks. The people remained on edge, unsure whether the enemy was already inside the gates, or whether the worst was still to come. Within the walls, the militia doubled down on their efforts. They were ready for anything, or so they hoped. But deep down, they knew one thing. They were in the dark about what was truly happening, and that was the most unsettling thing of all. Rumors of cultist attacks continued to circulate, though none were confirmed. The only certainty was that the threat was real. Brum'karoth was a city on edge, bracing for something they could neither predict nor fully prepare for.